When you were in San Diego last, we were talking about, first of all, we were talking about how much we have in common. It was so crazy.
Oh,
The
it was nuts.
I tell everybody, I'm like, Ben is like my twin, or in a male form. It's really weird.
I know, there has to be a name for that, because sister from another mother doesn't sound as good as brother from another mother. And yeah, twin with a different parent doesn't sound good either. So we'll figure out something. I don't know.
We need to figure out something, but
yeah.
Since our thought processes are so similar, when you were talking about your passion behind your podcast, you really inspired me to start one, because up until that point, I was so against having a podcast. I had this preconceived notion of what a podcast may be. And when we were talking about just how much we love to learn and how we're always interviewing doctors, and I mean, for the last 15 years, I've been traveling around the world interviewing doctors, and you're like, yeah, but you could record it and then other people can learn too. And it was like,
yeah,
ooh, the floodgates opened. And I was like, why am I not doing a podcast? So Hydrate podcast, a big part of it is you, Ben Greenfield. So thank you.
Oh, wow. I feel privileged now. I got to go check it out. So you have episodes out and everything already?
Yeah, we're
sweet.
The 15th or 16th episode already.
Oh, amazing. Okay, well, I got to go dig in now.
Yeah, I mean, we
That's
have
awesome.
all of the favorites in there. You know, Gerald Pollock's there.
Oh, Pollock's great.
Our good friend Robert Slovak. We're doing
yeah.
And as we both know, 98.9% of the molecules in our body are water molecules. And I thought, why is nobody spending more time talking about this? Because you can talk about this forever.
I love it. It's a great niche, long tail topic. I'll check out my dad sometime. My dad would be a good interview. He's a real water expert.
Yeah, that's what you were saying. You said that your dad was a water expert. So we'll get him on the show. We should do a three-way and have him hassle you.
Little father-son love.
Yeah, I think that would actually make for some good comedy. It would be really interesting. So anyways, I'm sure you've had many water shows talking with Robert. And have you had Pollock on your show before?
Yeah, a long time ago.
Yeah. So I'm sure you've delved into that world because it's a huge part of health and wellness. But we're going deeper. And that was one of your suggestions that you gave me. You said, if you could start a podcast or do it all over again, you would make it more niche. You would do something.
That's right.
And so I listened to you and I made it very specific.
Good. I mean, you can always get too specific. You could do sweaters for rodents or something like that. And that's a little bit too long tail, but yeah, something like water, you've got a lot of directions you can go with water. So sweet. Yeah. I love it.
Sweaters for rodents wouldn't be that great. But anyway, so I know that you get interviewed a lot. A lot of people know the Ben Greenfield from your show. I really wanted to get to know the Ben Greenfield a little deeper because your story is so interesting, the story that you were sharing with me. And I thought it would be fun for our listeners to hear a little bit about the man behind the show. Cool. So you started, first of all, I would like to ask you, what lights you up and gets you up in the morning? What is that driving force that gets you excited to do all of this stuff that you do? It's hard. It's not easy. This stuff.
Yeah. Are we, John? By the way, we are recording, right? Okay, cool. Yeah. Well, what gets me excited in the morning? I was actually thinking about this. It's funny you asked just the other day because I was kind of low on sleep. Well, low on sleep right now, actually. It's hunting season, so I've been up since about 4 because my boys and I have been hunting whitetail starting yesterday. And, I have days like that where I'm sleep deprived or I shouldn't have as much energy as I do. And yet I feel really driven. Like I wake up out of bed and it's like, I can't wait to go to work and go get things done and go contribute to the world. And really, it's very simple. I think it all comes down to, what the Japanese call ikigai, or in Sardinia, the plan de vida, this idea that if you identify a really succinct and clearly spelled out purpose for your life, it just fuels you more than caffeine or nicotine or sugar or energy or any pick-me-up or nootropic or smart drug or anything else, or, even an ice bath all day long. And, we of course know the opposite is true. There's that whole retire and die concept where once you lose connection with your purpose or your meaning in life or how it is you're contributing to the world, it becomes very easy to become depressed and kind of check out, so to speak, or at least not feel motivated to even do something as simple as, get out of bed at a decent time. And so for myself, and really this is for my whole family, my wife and my twin boys, we all have a really clear, single, succinct purpose statement for our life that we use to fuel us. And that purpose statement can change as you weave your way through life. But it's typically one statement that defines how it is that you're going to contribute to a world and make a lasting impact on this planet with the life that you've been given, and typically involves a utilization of the skill sets, the unique passions, interests, and talents that you were born with, and that you've actually kind of liked to do since you were a kid, and are also the things that might make time go by quickly now, put you in a state of flow, so to speak. And I have an article I recently published on my website called How to Find Your Purpose in Life, and I get into kind of a systematic method of creating that purpose statement. And once you have your purpose statement and you've really memorized it and you visit it every day, and I'll tell you the best way to do that momentarily. For me, when I wake up and I know, whether it's an article or a podcast or a video or a meeting or a consult or an advisory session or a coaching session or anything else, if it feeds into that purpose statement in some way, and it's really, I will only do something if it does feed into my purpose statement, if it is a hell yes for my purpose statement, because if it's not, it's just going to be energy draining, not energy bestowing. But what I do is engage in anything that fulfills my purpose statement. And because of that, I'm really able to feel as though everything I'm doing is making impact. And furthermore, I have a lot of energy to do the things that I want to do in life. And then the other important thing is, our family has a journaling practice. So every morning we gather, if it's in the summer, on the front porch in the sunshine, or if it's cold or dreary or in the winter, we'll gather around the fireplace in the living room. And in the morning, we all share one thing that we're grateful for after we meditate for a little while. And then we also share one person that we want to pray for or help or serve that day. So we kind of start the day with gratitude and service and meditation. And then at the end of the day, we engage in a practice of self-examination, which is basically, it's kind of an old practice. The Jesuits made it quite popular via a process called examine. Benjamin Franklin was also quite noted for his process of self-examination and the journaling protocol that he did each day, which included self-examination. But it's essentially a practice of asking yourself at the end of each day, what good have I done this day? And what could I have done better this day? So you're learning from both your successes and your failures, so you know the things that you did really well at that are repeatable, and then you also know the things that you could have adjusted to do a little bit better the next day. And they can be simple things. I mean, it can be even something as simple as mine 2 nights ago was that I was making dinner for the family, and I was just really checked out. I'm listening to an audiobook, really great audiobook that I'm listening to right now that I'm just obsessed with. But, I was just immersed in the audiobook. I was checking text messages, I'm cooking, and I finished the whole meal, and the meal turned out fine. It's not like I burnt the house down or anything, but I felt kind of disconnected from the process. And the next night, I made dinner for the family again. And this time, it was no MP3 player. I was rubbing my rosemary and thyme between my fingers, listening to the feeling the heat come off the pan, tasting with my finger, and just being immersed in the process of cooking. Because in self-examination, on the night that I wasn't fully present and mindful while preparing a meal, when we did our self-examination at the end of the day, I told my family, I felt like I kind of failed at that, or at least I could have rose to the occasion of being immersed with all my senses, in God's wonderful bounty while I was cooking. And so I learned from that, and the next night had an amazing experience cooking, and it was almost like, mindfulness meditation cooking that next day, because I learned from that failure. So that's just one tiny example of how self-examination can kind of make you a better person in these small increments every day. So we have gratitude and service and meditation at the beginning of the day, then self-examination, but then finally, after what good have I done this day and what could I have done better this day, we revisit our purpose statement every single day. And the way we do that is we each go around and we say, what's one way that I lived out my purpose statement today, right? So, for example, for me, that might be writing an article or outlining an article, or it might be recording a video, or it might be even like doing a really good workout that prepares me to compete. Because again, although purpose statements can change as you navigate through the chapters of the book that is your life, my current purpose statement is to read, write, learn, teach, sing, speak, compete, and create in full presence and selfless love to the glory of God. Right, so that's my purpose statement. So when I visit at the end of the day, what's one way I lived out my life's purpose statement today, then, if I've been creating or competing, reading, writing, learning, teaching, singing, or speaking, and not just doing those things, but doing them in presence, doing them in a spirit towards others, not like how is this going to make me money, but how is this going to make other people's lives better? And then also doing it to the very best of my abilities, which is, I think, one of the best ways that we can just give back to our Creator is to just do a really good job at whatever's come across our plates that day. And, in magnifying it with excellence given to everything, that satisfies that last key for my purpose statement to the glory of God, because I feel like it's a way I can give back to the entity that breathed life into me from the beginning. Then it satisfies the purpose statement if any of those things fall into that category. And if I get to the end of the day and I have a really hard time thinking of how I satisfied my life's purpose statements, because I was just like, I don't know, getting coffees and in random meetings and doing meaningless phone calls or whatever, surfing around on Netflix during lunch or something, it's a really good way for me to see a day in which I might not be living out my purpose fully. And I think that's really important, that you not only hone down your purpose statement in one single succinct sentence, so that you do have, to respond to your question, the energy that you want at your beck and call all day long, but then you revisit that purpose statement each day. And I even encourage people every year to sit down with your purpose statement and see if your interests or your passions or your desires have changed, if you've evolved in your enlightenment towards becoming a more complete and whole individual, from a contributory standpoint. And your purpose statement might change. Like mine used to be to empower people to live an adventurous, joyful, and fulfilling life, which was great for that phase of my life in which I was kind of like competing as an athlete and all these masochistic events across the planet and crossing finish lines and doing things that were really kind of like more yang, inspirational, kind of like warrior cowboy phase of life. But as I pass into more of what I would consider to be kind of out of the warrior phase and more into kind of like the king phase of life, I consider my purpose statement to be something new. And so yeah, that's what keeps me alive each day, partially is just knowing my purpose and getting out of bed, jumping up in the air, clicking my heels together with a big smile on my face and being ready to just go live my purpose statement as fully as possible. I see that I'm still recording. Might have lost Tracy though. I don't know if the audience is still with me. I suppose I could just keep on talking mindlessly, or I could check and see what happened with Tracy here. Usually if I lose somebody while I'm on a call, they eventually come back on. So we'll see if she comes back on. And I guess this is my opportunity to hijack Tracy's podcast and tell you guys you don't need to drink water. Water is really overrated. Have you ever heard of breatharians who get by on living on their breath alone? That's a perfect example, a highly scientific example of someone who does not need water. No, I'm kidding. I think water is very, very important. I drink a lot of water with hydrogen tablets in it. I have a hydrogen-rich water machine. I drink from a whole house structured water filtration unit. I drink from well water primarily at home, but that's still filtered for iron and for manganese. Then it's structured via whole house structured water system. Then I add minerals and hydrogen back to that. So that's kind of my water setup at home. And when I travel, I have like a portable structuring unit and do a lot of water from local springs, if I can find local springs at like a local Whole Foods, or from Glass Pellegrino, Perrier, Gerolsteiner, things like that. Hey, welcome back to your podcast. Hello.
I don't know what happened. I lost you.
Well, you know what's funny is it kept recording, and so I just kept talking after you left so rudely, your own podcast guest. But don't worry, I kept your audience on board because I think it kept recording the whole time, and I was explaining to everyone my own water filtration system at home that I use. Well, you weren't there, and so I figured I'd just keep on talking because I didn't want folks to just sit on their hands, you know.
All right. Well, I'm so glad that you kept them entertained while I was away.
Said a lot of bad things about you, of course.
No problem. It's fine. We understand. Okay, so you're talking about your purpose statement, talking about how you live that out every day.
Yeah, right before you dropped off, I was just saying that really is, you know, how I keep myself fueled and inspired and motivated every day. It's just returning to that purpose statement over and over again.
You know, I love that, Ben, because so many people have a purpose statement for their business, for all different aspects of their life, but not actually like their personal development. And that's beautiful. I have a purpose statement, but mine's super simple. Maybe I need to define it better.
Oh, no, it can be very simple. My wife's purpose statement, for example, is I want to minister to my family. And that's it. And so, because that's what she loves to do. She just loves to like cook and take care of the house and be with the kids and hang out with me and just kind of like keep everything on the home front kind of put together. And so that's her purpose statement. You know, one of my son's purpose statements is he wants to create art that elicits positive emotions for people, right? And so that's two examples of very simplistic purpose statements. But you know what? If my son gets out of bed in the morning, he knows he's got the whole day to just create art and fulfill his purpose statement, and specifically create art that's very emotive, then, you know, that's absolutely wonderful. It can be simple. I tend to be a very complex person who overcomplexifies things. So my purpose statement kind of got a little bit out of control there, but it doesn't have to be crazy.
There's a lot of aspects to it. Well, I feel that you do exemplify all of the things that you had in your purpose statement, because when you were here, I remember there was an open mic night, and you're like, I'm gonna go play, I'm gonna go do that.
I remember that.
It was awesome, and you blessed so many people with your voice and your talent, and so you're very multifaceted, Ben. Okay.
Well, you know, that purpose statement thing, like I mentioned, part of it is what you love to do when you were a kid. And I loved music when I was a kid. I loved to sing. I still do. So why would I leave that out of my purpose statement? You know, if I know that fuels my soul, and if I know that even at the end of a long day, I can feel super connected to my purpose statement by busting out a guitar or ukulele and just singing for a while to my family, or doing, you know, sometimes I'll do Instagram lives or, you know, little open mics like you talked about, then that's great. You know, maybe I'm not writing some best-selling book or something, but it still totally satisfies my purpose statement and totally leaves me with a smile on my face.
Yes, I love it. So I was thinking, you're talking about your sons. What changed inside of you? Did your purpose for life, your fire for life, your drive, did any of that change when your sons were born?
Nah, kids don't change anything. What are you talking about? It's like the one thing people tell you that's super annoying. Like when you have your first kids, they're like, "Oh, things are really gonna change," and all you want to say back to them is, "No shit." But anyways, yeah, the best way I can describe it. Well, I had twins, you know, so I'm sitting there in the ultrasound room at the hospital, and the ultrasound technician comes in and, you know, scans my wife, and at the time had spent a lot of time in emergency rooms and surgical wards. I went all through college. I was pre-med and did a lot of shadowing, and knew my way around ultrasounds. And as soon as it pulled up, I'm like, oh, there's two people in there. But I felt like if there wasn't, and if for some reason, like, I'm like, maybe I'm not seeing something right. Maybe like she knows something about like ultrasounds that I don't. So I'm just gonna keep my mouth shut. And so she left the room, and I'm just looking, I'm like, there's two. And then she comes back in and she says to my wife, do you have a history of multiples in your family? And I'm like, those are twins, aren't they? And she's like, yes. And so that was amazing. And then, even from that moment, but especially, exponentially greater when they're born, you get washed over with this near overwhelming sense of responsibility. I'd never thought about things like my work schedule, which at the time was, I was a personal trainer running 2 gyms. I'd leave the house at about 4:30, 5 a.m., ride my bike 8 miles downtown to my studio, train people until like noon, and then work for a while on my computer, and then work out, and then train people again from like 5 until around 8 p.m., then get on my bike, then ride home, get home around 9, and then do some more computer work to work on my website and email clients. And then sometimes I'd stay up till like 2 a.m. because I was trying to build an online business at the same time I was running my personal training studios and gyms. And I was also trying to write my first book. And I was just like totally obsessed with like, building my little empire. And so I suddenly began to reevaluate the way I was spending my time, and how I was building my business, because I was just working a lot of hours, trading time for money, so to speak. And so I had to start thinking about how I actually create a business that can continue to function outside of me and isn't fully dependent on me working 12 hours a day. It's one example, because I really wanted to see my kids and spend time with them. We homeschool them, right? So I wanted to be home and be with them. And so I had to change a lot of things from a business standpoint. In addition to that, I'd never really thought about things like legacy, a family trust, a family constitution, protection of family wealth, passing on your inheritance to your children, but doing so in a responsible manner, insuring myself so that if I die, my wife and children are taken care of. Like, I'd never really thought that responsibly or that professionally about a lot of those things. And suddenly, I had to. I was like, oh shit, I'm a father now, and I'm not just raising my children. And this is a really cool way to think about parenting. I'm raising my children's children, right? And everything I do, everything I implement is going to affect Greenfield generations for hundreds of years to come. I better put on my big boy pants. And so, it changed things from a responsibility standpoint, from a business structuring standpoint, and then, just from a personal standpoint, it certainly does. It softens you. It teaches you how to kind of tangle sacrifice and love and presence in ways that you've never really had to before. I realize that marriage can do that to a certain extent, but childhood or childbirth, I would say 10 times that. And so, yeah, it changed a lot, and all for the better, right? Like, all for the better, because I could totally see myself just continuing to work until burnout and, and not be that fulfilled. And, a lot of things in my life changed for the better when I had kids.
Yeah, that's one of the things we have in common. We'll have Irish twins, so it's a big undertaking.
Yeah.
We have so many parallels. It's kind of unreal. But the Irish twins. I think that it's a lot easier, though. When they're little, it's really hard. But once they get a little bit older, it becomes a little easier to take care of twins, because you can drop them.
Important is to engage in solo time with the twins and to allow them to be their own individuals, and not to assume that they're going to have identical passions or interests or, speak of the devil, purpose statements in life. And, it's so easy to think of them as a pair, which they really are. That's a unique and cool and magical thing about being a twin. But at the same time, you want to ensure that they do have the ability to be able to grow as individuals, and so like they'll have their rite of passage into adolescence next year, and they'll be, completely off on their own in the wilderness for 5 days by themselves, apart from their twins or apart from their twin, engage with their own thoughts and their own emotions and some of the loneliness and ego dissolution that accompanies that. And that will be good for them. Just as good as, going out on a date with dad or out on a date with mom, but not having your twin present, and just going out for discussions that often are a lot different, these discussions, when it's the two of them apart versus just one of them at a time. So mom and I are pretty careful to make sure that we recognize and we see their individuality, while at the same time, allowing them to enjoy all the magic that involves having, really someone you've been intertwined with physically and mentally and spiritually since birth.
Yeah, I 100% agree on that. That's very important to give them their individuality. How was it for you growing up? You're so driven and passionate. Were your parents, were they parents that really had high expectations of you, or really pushed you towards certain things? Or what was it like growing up in your home?
Well, yeah, I think you already mentioned this, but I was homeschooled, and so had a very kind of somewhat unstructured education, even though my schooling, traditional homeschooling, you have a set curriculum, you sit around with mom, sometimes dad at the kitchen table, doing all of your book learning, and it's kind of like traditional schooling, but at home. Whereas with our kids, they're unschooled, meaning that they don't have books, they don't have a curriculum. We just pay attention to what their passions, their interests, and their desires are, then surround them with as many toys and games and books and activities and tutors and trips that satisfy what it is they're interested in. And so, for example, if we're gonna, I recently took them over to Dubai, right? So we didn't do anything for like a month leading into that trip, aside from cook Middle Eastern cuisine and learn some new words, and build Lego towers of the different hotels and places we're going to sightsee over there and study the culture and the language and the customs. And that's an example of block-based learning, which I think is a little bit underemphasized these days. Just taking time to just immerse or steep yourself in one specific passion, which is kind of the cool aspect of unschooling, is that you can do that. I think you just get back on board with where you left off when you want to, because as with most states, like the state of Washington where we live, they do have 12 core curricula that you must show your children have been demonstrably immersed in, like social studies, math, art, science, etc. And that's not hard to do. Like if my kids make a wild mushroom risotto, that can count as social science, it can count as chemistry, it can count as math. If it's got an ethnic twist to it, we're using some Japanese mushrooms, it can count as social studies. And so, I think the benefits of unschooling, as long as parents are willing to accept that kind of slightly more loosey-goosey approach versus the structured curriculum approach, I think the pros outweigh the cons. But I was homeschooled, and I've always been kind of an autodidact, very self-driven.
Yeah.
I would take all the books and learn myself, and just go sit in my room and read and take all the tests and take all the quizzes and leave them out on the table for mom. And that's just the way I've been wired since I was a little boy, really. I mean, I have just always loved to learn and loved to read, and would rather be around a book than around people most of the time. And so part of that was just nature, not nurture. I was born as someone who just loved to learn and who was intensely curious. And I think it's important that everyone at some point in their lives, if your parents are living, find your parents and interview them about your childhood. If you create your purpose statement, because you'll learn about a whole bunch of things you loved to do when you were a kid and you were good at doing when you were a kid. And that can kind of inform you as to the type of things that you should be doing now. And so I've interviewed both my parents a couple of times, and that's one thing that pops up over and over again, how weird it was that I would just take stuff and learn it without anybody even checking in on me. So I think, part of that is not something special my parents did. I think that was just kind of how I'm wired, so to speak. And I also had an older brother who was kind of like a black sheep of the family, who got into a lot of trouble, who was in and out of jail, in his teenage years, and did a lot of drugs and got involved with a lot of wrong people. And really was one of those people who was super, influenced by what he perceived the world wanted him to be rather than being his own authentic individual. So when he fell in with the wrong crowd, he got into, a lot of trouble just trying to be this other person. And so as a result, like I kind of felt as though I wanted to prove to my parents that I was better than him. And I think that also drove a certain amount of perfectionism and drive in me. I also had a lot of feedback from my parents that they thought I was smarter, that they thought I was going to go on and do great things in life, that they thought I was kind of like the chosen one. So I also grew up with a little bit of like a white knight hero mentality. And so that was more the nurture component. My parents just, of my 2 brothers and 2 sisters and me, I got that a lot more than my siblings. And so I think I also was just kind of hardwired from an early age to think, oh, I got to go on and do great things with my life. And I don't think that's necessarily a good thing, that a parent you're so good or you're so much smarter or whatever, because I'm a big fan of Carol Dweck's fixed mindset philosophy that, we are all highly plastic individuals who can learn to become good at just about anything with the proper practice and dedication and devotion. And I would never tell my kids something like, oh, you're better at math than your brother, or you're just naturally good at this, right? I always tell them, oh, you practice really hard, you're doing a great job, I can see how hard you're working at this. Or if they're having trouble with something, this is something you can learn. Let's figure out a way to make this more meaningful and more enjoyable for you, right? If you're learning, arithmetic, let's go grocery shopping. You pick out all the foods, you put it in the cart, but you get to choose what's the best deal. You get to choose all the prices. Or, at the restaurant, you get to calculate the tip, and here's the budget, and you figure out what we're going to get off the menu based on the food budget. And, you make it really relevant to them when they're not good at something so that they can grow a passion for it. For me, I've always loved to be a saver, someone who's financially savvy, someone who invests, who puts away wealth. And so for me, I never really got interested in math until college, when my college math professor was basically teaching everything based on finances and investing. And I went from being like a pretty poor math student to just like top of the class nearly overnight, because I suddenly became very passionate about math. And so the way that I was raised, I think, did kind of influence a little bit of a driven mentality. But it's interesting too, because there's actually a really great new book called Driven that I recently read. And, there are COMT and dopaminergic pathways genetically that dictate that some people just need that constant dopamine hit. Some people need to feel every single day that sense of accomplishment. Some people have a hard time just sitting and staring off into the sunset, sipping a glass of wine, and would rather be off doing, anything but, because they feel as though they just need to constantly be accomplishing or producing or creating. And I don't think that's wrong. I think that God created certain people who might be the people who are like up at night protecting the camp or thinking of new things, and other people might be really good at just being like a free-flowing artist, like my wife is, for example. But yeah, my wife will sit on the porch for hours with like one glass of wine and stare off into the sun and the trees out there in the prairie, and I'll go out there for a couple of minutes. I'll be like, even if I'm not working, I'll be like, I got to go learn a new song on the guitar, or I got to go start reading this book I'm super interested in, and so I think probably just from a genetic standpoint, I'm wired up that way a little bit too. So yeah, it's a little bit of nature, it's a little bit of nurture. And I think also I got lucky again from the autodidact standpoint, in that because I read a lot of books, I read a lot of self-improvement books, starting with, the old school Tony Robbins audios, all the way to John Osseroff and Charlie Munger, and even the Bible and the Proverbs and the words of wisdom there. And, I'm constantly gleaning from all these self-improvement books because I love to read. And I think that's shaped, to a certain extent, my purpose statement and my connection with myself and what I want to accomplish. And I think that just further fuels this, drive, so to speak.
Yeah, I love that. Gosh, every time you talk, I find more things that we have parallels. I had a hard time with math too. I remember I was homeschooled, like we were both homeschooled, but I could barely do algebra, and it frustrated me that I couldn't figure it out, and that just wasn't okay.
Yeah.
So then I became passionate about it. And within a year, I was actually tutoring calculus at the
Yeah.
college, you know, and
It's
it's like,
amazing.
yeah. So from not being able to do algebra to tutoring calculus, that's like, we have this crazy parallel in
What
our
what
life.
what what was it for you that sparked a passion for math? What made it relevant to you?
Well, I think it was more the fact that I felt like I couldn't do it, that I wasn't good at it. And
Hmm.
that's never, no was never an answer, like that I can't. And
Right.
so the story I was telling myself was that I couldn't. So I had to flip the switch in my head. And literally that thought process, changing the story, is what changed everything for me. I decided that I was going to be good at it.
Yeah. Yep. That's one thing that'll happen in driven individuals who are driven genetically, is a failure will result in someone rising to the occasion. Like, another example is I really wanted to go to medical school, and, I was pre-med all through college. I took the MCATs. I got accepted to 6 different medical schools. I did not get accepted to 2 different MD, PhD programs at Duke and UPenn that I wanted to get into. And I was super pissed about that. And so I thought, okay, I'm just going to make myself even smarter and even better. So I spent a year just like taking all these additional courses, getting my master's degree, and then going and working in the private sector, which ultimately resulted in me actually being steeped in medicine, in hip and knee surgical sales coming out of college, which was a great job paycheck wise, but left a really nasty taste in my mouth for modern allopathic medicine and for Western medicine, and the, $40,000 overpriced hips and knees, these morbidly obese patients who would have been much better being given preventive advice were having put into them, paid for by insurance, and, this sick care system and unhappy doctors and, unhealthy hospitals. I quit that job after 6 months, and I got back into fitness and exercise physiology and biomechanics, and partnered with a local doctor and began running these almost like these sports performance laboratories, and was super happy doing that. But I also was, even in that position, I wanted to be a trainer who somebody went to when nothing else was working for them, right? So I had all the high-speed video cameras and the indirect calorimetry equipment and all the blood testing and all these physician partners, and kind of carved out a name for myself as being like the ultimate concierge personal trainer, because I just want to be the best of the best. And I know that part of that was because I thought, okay, well, if I'm not going to be like a doctor, I'm just going to be better than the doctors, And so that's an example of that's an example of failure fueling,
Right.
my growth as a person. And so, yeah, that's common. People will fail at something, and it will ultimately make them a better person. But it's important that that's all done. Well, think about it this way. My wife and I have this saying that we have no regrets, only gratefulness, right? God works in mysterious ways, and the zigzaggy path that takes you from point A to point B is often not what you expect at all. But you can't look back and say, oh, whatever, I'm pissed that I didn't get into medical school, or I wasn't good at algebra, or, I broke my leg when I was 15 and didn't make the basketball team or anything like that, because, maybe when you broke your leg, well, you were laid up for those 6 months, you discovered cellular metabolism and you began to understand the mitochondria, and you're 35 years old now, finishing with a PhD in biochemistry, and you're going to go on and find the cure for cancer because you broke your leg when you were 15 playing basketball, right? And those are the kind of weird pathways that dictate that, yeah, you shouldn't have any regrets about the past, because everything that happens, good or bad, is typically meant to happen for a really good reason. And so when you're a driven person and you have these failures in life, you're never bitter or regretful about them. You're always grateful about them, and you're always looking for the opportunities that they brought your way. And you're seeing hopefully how a lot of this stuff feeds back on itself, and back to that concept of, for example, the self-examination that you do at night. Like, what did I fail at today? And how is that going to make me a better person? How can I be grateful for this failure? How is it going to take me to the next level? How is this going to make other people's lives better because I learned a lesson through failure? And so yeah, it's really important to couch it in that terms of no regretfulness, no bitterness, only forgiveness and appreciation and gratitude, and then rising to the next level from any failure.
Oh, yes, I 100% agree. But would you also agree that we have a choice in that moment to choose to rise up and take that obstacle and transmute it, turn it into an opportunity, or we have that choice where we can let fear overcome us. Because, you know, I know in that moment when I felt like I couldn't do algebra, there was a fear inside of me that it was like, okay, well, everyone else knows how to do this but me, so there might be something wrong with me. There's some innate you know, type of a thing inside of me that's flawed. And so we can be paralyzed by fear as well, or we can take that and say, nope, I want to change the story and recognize that's
and watch Netflix, and you know, stuff's going to unfold the way it's supposed to unfold. But that's the, you know, that's the deep mystery of free will, you know, that, which is, you know, essentially kind of this idea of God helps those who help themselves, right? Like, there is a great plan. There is a great, magical, wonderful story written out for your life from when you were born, from before when you were born, from when this planet was breathed into existence. Like, God knew about you and created an amazing plan and an amazing story for your life. But he also made you in such a way that you get to choose which path you're going to take in life. And if you choose a path that is dishonorable, or that is lazy, or that does not, for example, follow a lot of the centering, grounding, foundational advice we might find in the Bible, then what's going to happen is that you actually won't become that person who you were meant to be. So it's really weird. It is, you know, a lot of people will think that they have no say in life, but you actually do. And you know, it's a very, very weird relationship between us and our Creator in that sense, is that, you know, he equipped all of us for greatness and chose an amazing story for our lives, but then we still need to take action and, you know, develop that purpose statement, wake up every day and do everything that God has put in our plate as excellently as possible, and in a spirit of loving others and following the golden rule. And when you do that, the map unfolds in a really, really great way. And when you think of yourself, what can I accomplish today? What's in this for me? I'm just simply going to live a life devoted to my own passions and pleasures and pursuits. Then a lot of times things unfold in a direction that is the polar opposite of the great story that was written for your life. So yeah, it really, really is interesting. And, you know, I think that feeds into that whole concept of zigzagging a little bit too. Oh, made a wrong decision here. I'm going to learn from it. I'm still on my way, on the path I'm supposed to be on. Took a little detour here, took a little detour there, learned some lessons, became a better person, and I'm back on the path now.
Yeah, so true. I truly believe that no matter what we do, we can never get away from our divine Creator's love. We're always under the wings of that loving vibration, and there's nothing we can do to run away from it. But we do have that choice of how we want to perceive life, because I think it's all going to unfold beautifully, but are we seeing that? Is that the story that we see? Is that the perception that we have? And so every morning I have to go back and ask God, help me to see the world through your eyes of love, through your perception, because I can get so off in my thoughts and the story I'm thinking, the story I'm telling myself about what's happening. And then just trusting and surrendering that even though this isn't what I would have chosen, this is the most beautiful path that could have, that's all happening for me, not to me.
You struck such a chord with me there when you said that you are, you know, you're loved no matter what. And I think a lot of people, they haven't fully accepted that love and that forgiveness. They carry a burden of shame or of guilt. Maybe you did something really bad in your past, or maybe you're not living out your life's full purpose now. Maybe you struggle with things like selfishness or greed or envy or deception. And so you kind of have almost like this backpack with some really heavy bricks in it that you're just carrying around all the time, because you feel as though you've done these things and therefore you've fallen out of the love that God would normally give to you. And, you know, there's this great old John Bunyan story called Pilgrim's Progress.
I love that story.
Yeah, his name is actually Christian. And he's got this burden, and he realizes in this story that he can take that heavy backpack off, like literally be light as a feather. And it's so simple, it's almost childlike. Like all you have to do, you know, and the book of John in the Bible dictates this really elegantly. It's like all you have to do is believe that you are saved, believe that you are loved, believe in that epic, the most epic hero's journey of all time, right? The fact that a God man came down here, underwent every last piece of sin and suffering and shame that has ever happened and that will ever happen, bore all of that, experienced all of that for the strangest reason possible, because he didn't need to, but apparently God loved these tiny humans that he made so much. He decided to do that. And as a result, like anything that happens to you in life that you're carrying around as this heavy burden that's weighing you down, that's making you feel unloved, you can release all of that. You can simply say, oh, I believe that I can take all this off and I'm still loved and I'm washed as white as snow, and I can be washed as white as snow every single day. And it's like the lightest, most amazing feeling in the world once you understand that you have no requirement to have any shame, any regrets, any guilt, and you are fully loved every second of the day. It baffles me how many people walk around with that heavy backpack and that heavy burden, because like I've made so many mistakes in my life. I've done so much dumb shit. I have, I've done things I can carry around in my heavy backpack every single day and just get weighed down through life with these things. We know they manifest biologically in issues such as cancer and chronic stress and all the things that, someone like Bruce Lipton would dictate in his book, Biology of Belief, or that Dawson Church might talk about in his new book, Bliss, or that Joe Dispenza talks about in Super. Our emotions and our beliefs and our physical health is so important to understand, and so intimately tied to that idea that if you're walking around in life with this heavy backpack of guilt and shame and regret, it's just going to weigh you down until your body eventually buckles. And when you unstrap it and throw it off and you feel free as a bird, because you've all of a sudden realized, oh, all I have to do is believe that this could just be taken away from me and I'm fully loved no matter what. It's the most amazing, magical feeling in the world. And so that's so important that you say that you're loved no matter what.
Yeah. Oh, I know. It's everything. That's actually my morning mantra every morning. Is I say to God, I ask God that, first of all, since everything starts from vibration, I ask God, please sing your song of love over me. Let every cell in my body, every atom vibrate to the frequency of your true love. And then I ask that I would love at the highest level in every single interaction. And that's it. That's my
Yep.
daily
yeah. And that word love, and the vibration and frequency of that word, or any other word that elicits a positive emotion like gratitude or hope or peace or joy, we know that vibrates every single cell of your body. This podcast is about water. Your podcast is about water. We know that water carries these energetic frequencies, and we are water-filled beings. And when we expose ourselves to these positive mantras, these frequencies, whether they be emitted by ourselves or whether they're positive energetic frequencies, such as, blasting a glass of water with wonderful sunlight in the morning, or maybe, placing it next to one of those biochargers that you have in your office, or a different frequency generator, or taking really, really good music and playing that to your plants, playing it to your food, playing it to your water. These are all principles that are viewed as woo in the scientific community, but emerging evidence continues to pile up that shows that water can carry frequencies, that cells respond to specific vibratory frequencies based on the tiny microscopic cilia on the surface of every cell. Even different organs will respond to different frequencies, which is the whole that's the whole thesis behind sound medicine and sound healing. And when you understand that, and then you begin to surround yourself with positive vibrations and frequencies, and you surround the water that you drink and the food that you eat and the music that you listen to with those same vibrations and frequencies, you suddenly turn yourself into this vibratory, energetic being. And when you walk into a room, people can feel that. And it's just such a powerful thing to understand. And of course, it works in reverse. It works in reverse, that anger and shame and fear, some of the lowest vibratory emotions, and heavy metal and depressing music, or music that's laced with terms or lyrics that are derogatory or that bring people down. All of that is basically carrying frequencies into your water, into your food, into your body, into your cells, that do the complete opposite. And you have a lot of power over what type of frequencies that you expose yourself to, what type of vibrations and emotions you expose yourself to. And when you exercise that power, you can change your life dramatically.
Ugh, yes, you said it all right there. That's it. And I've been getting so excited about the fact that, okay, we're not victims of our health. We really do have choices. And when we think about the fact that 98.9% of the molecules in our body are water molecules, and water is the source receiver of all information it comes in contact with, that term about living water that the Bible speaks about really starts to resonate and make sense now, because it's like, all right, we have the choice to choose living frequencies, living water, things that are life-giving, the word that we speak when we're speaking our authentic truth from a loving place, when we're listening to, like you said, music that doesn't have dissonance, but that has harmony, and the thoughts that we're thinking when we're single-minded with the truth and love. And when we're acting out all those things, that is sending a frequency into the water molecules in our body that's actually receiving that message, and that is a part of who we are. So it's like, that's what got me so excited about water. Once I realized that, I thought, oh my gosh, okay, there's this chemical aspect to water that's very important. But equally as important is the physics of it and the bioenergetics of it. And when we take into consideration those aspects, we really have so much opportunity to improve our health, to improve our state. And like you just mentioned, when you walk into a room, people can feel that. We're animals by nature, you know, and a snail doesn't go to a plant that's not thriving. It knows through vibration that it goes to eat a plant that's alive and thriving and full of nutrients. And the same with us. We naturally, when we walk into a room, can feel if somebody is in a dissonant state, if there's cohesiveness inside, if there's peace, if there's love, if they're vibrating at that high frequency, or if there's dissonance and they're not being authentic and they're not being true. We know. It's like our instincts tell us.
Yeah. Spiritual literature from a wide variety of religions, notably Christianity, as you've alluded to, you see three repetitive themes over and over again. Breath, right? The breath of life and the breath of the spirit, and the fact that that breath can be both life-giving and life-thwarting, depending on what we say or what we don't say, the way that we inhale, the way that we exhale, and the way that we express gratitude for each breath that we're given. We have this breath of life concept, and the breath, of course, is integral to prayer. Breath is integral to meditation. Breath is integral to sex. Breath is integral to exercise. Breath is integral to so many aspects of light. And then the second, or life, and then the second is light, right? We know that the infrared rays of sunlight and these beams that bounce off us during the day can work with water to charge our bodies up, and can also allow us to photosynthesize in a way very similar to plants. And light is crucial for energy on this planet and life on this planet. But we also know that in the very beginning, in the beginning of all time, was the word of God. It was described as light and life. And so we know that both breath and light are two things that we should become total ninjas in if we really want to optimize our health and our physiology and our spiritual health and our mental health. And then the last component, in addition to breath and light, is water, right? We know that we can be anointed with the Spirit, and that's often kind of the way that's done, and in many cases be something like baptism. We know that water can cleanse us. We know that water can carry, as you've talked about, these vibratory frequencies that influence our body or plants or anything else that it touches. And so I would say if there's three things people could do, they could just become intimately familiar with and aware of and mindful of and present with their breath, their light exposure, especially from natural sunlight, and then finally the water that they drink and the water that they water their plants with or shower. Hey, then, and man, if you're already eating a somewhat healthy diet and you have a good movement protocol and you dial in your breath and your light and your water, then you're going to feel a pretty profound impact on your energy levels and your overall health.
Yeah, absolutely. And crazy thing is, those are so simple. They're simple things that we didn't really think much about when we were children, right? We usually played outside in full spectrum sunlight. We grounded to the earth. We were laughing. We were moving. We were playing. We were breathing. Usually our diaphragm wasn't all knotted and tensed up from, the weight of the world. And so all those things that you just said, it feels kind of childlike. It's like if we could go
Yep.
back to that true essence. I was just at the beach yesterday watching these little kids run on the beach, and I thought, oh my gosh, that's just innate in them to laugh, to play,
Yep.
to have their shoes off, to be in the sun, getting charged by the ocean. And as we get older, we pull more and more away from that. And if we can
Yep.
just go back to that, then we're going to find that vitality again. We're going to find that
Yeah.
charge potential in our bodies and even
Yeah,
our
absolutely.
minds.
Absolutely. If we don't go back to that, and this I got to be done pretty close to 1 p.m. But if we don't go back to that, right? If we don't go back to that childlike wonder, being earth, being grounded, being aware of water, of breath, of life, of joy, of being our authentic selves, then we eventually reach a stage in life where we are on our deathbed. And there's this wonderful book and also a free article you can find online by Bonnie Rare, who's like an end of life, like a palliative care specialist. And, she studied up on the regrets of the dying. The book is called The 5 Regrets of the Dying. The article is called The 5 Regrets of the Dying. And it basically boils down to, I wish I'd have chosen to stay in touch with old friends more, right? And that returns to childhood, just playing with your friends, right? I wish I'd have chosen to be happier, right? Which children don't seem to have a hard time with. Laughing and smiling and just enjoying, the pleasures and the thrills of life in a joyful manner. I wish that I hadn't worked so hard, right? Again, kids don't feel this pressure to get up and fulfill Maslow's hierarchy and work their butts off and spend all their time doing instead of being. And then I wish I'd chosen to express my true feelings more, which again, children do a great job of. And we as adults, a lot of times, when we have love or anger or fear or joy or anything else, sometimes we just don't express those emotions. We let them build up inside. Comes back to that traditional Chinese medicine principle that I talked about earlier. And then finally, I wish I'd have chosen to be my true authentic self instead of who I expected the world wanted me to be, right? Which again, children are great at just being themselves. And then eventually we reach this stage in life where we think that to find success, we have to become who the world wants us to be. But if we can express our true emotions, work less hard, smile and be positive and create joy more, stay in touch with old friends, and really not give as much of a crap what the world thinks of us and instead be our true authentic selves, then it's a lot less likely that we are going to have regrets on our deathbed. And I think we can learn a lot from that.
Yeah, that goes back to what you're saying, how you made your personal mission statement. You asked your parents what you love to do as a child. So in order to be our true authentic self, sometimes we do need to go back and think about how were we when we were a child. And if you can't remember, maybe ask your parents or ask people that knew you, aunts, uncles, grandparents, what was your truest essence before we let the world's ideals get a hold of us?
Yep, you got it.
Well, it was so much fun having you on the show today, Ben. I can't wait to have you at the sanctuary back in January. Before we close out today, I just wanted to ask you if you could